welcome to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross and this episode of Lightning Strikes Twice, Transform Your Life and Finances with Janine Bolon. Janine has been literally struck by lightning. She has worked as an analytical biochemist, homeschooled 4 children, published 11 books and counting, because she's not done writing that yet, and has been married to a college sweetheart for over 30 years and was married. So in 2010, Janine was called into active service by the Thunder Clan and pulled into her life's purpose. So Janine, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I can't wait to have some fun and at the same time help your listeners.
Well, and that, to me, I always just kind of got, you get all these images in your head when you think of people like being struck by lightning and stuff. And if I remember right, you were struck not once, but twice. Were you not?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you share more about the profound impact of being struck by lightning and how it's shaped your outlook and life and purpose?
The first time I was struck by lightning, I was in middle school. So I had an upbringing that was unique for its day, I guess I should say. Not so much now, but for its day. My father was in the Navy, and so we moved around with him. And so my elementary school years, I was in Japan. I lived in Sasebo for 4 years. Then we were transferred to a small island in the Bahama Island chain in the Caribbean called Eleuthera. And that's where I was struck by lightning the first time. And I was on that little island, and I was standing in the middle of our living room floor, and the lightning was so loud and so big in that small space, in that tiny island house, that it just blinded me. And of course, I was deaf for a period of time, all that kind of stuff because of being hit. The thing that was unique or weird was that my family never talked about it, ever. Like, we never discussed it after that. My father was a Vietnam veteran, and so he came out of a deep sleep and was wondering why we were screaming. I was not screaming, but my sister and my mom both let out a scream, and we're not screamers, And so my dad thought the house was on fire or something. By the time he got out there, he couldn't understand why everybody was all upset. There wasn't even a scorch mark on the floor. And so that was one of those weird things where they talk about lightning and how bizarre it is. And I've talked to other people, and they were like, no, we always smelled burnt, ozone. Something was always burned. And in my case, it wasn't. But I thank goodness that my mother and my sister both were witness to it. Otherwise, I would have spent the rest of my life thinking I had imagined it.
Yeah. And but that's I'm curious now, why would you not talk about that? Do you have any idea or insight?
No idea. I have no idea why. It was like, my father was a very practical man, being in the military. And of course, he had survived, I think he had 6 or 7 Purple Hearts. He'd been shot multiple times in Vietnam, stuff like that. And so you get to a point where this was very much our family motto. If you're not hemorrhaging, if you're not bleeding, hemorrhaging, if you're breathing, if you're able to breathe, then it's truly not life or death. We're fine. We'll manage to work through whatever situation was. He was a CB. He was in the construction battalion. He saw a lot. And we were used to just picking up and moving and being very practical and pragmatic. And so that's pretty much why I picked the term the practical mystic, is because I'm very much boots on the ground. I'm very much like, if it's wonderful to get all this mystical and mindful tools, techniques. I'm not knocking anybody's paradigm on that. That's great. However, if I cannot implement what you're talking about, like say somebody walks up to me and says, oh, I can read your aura and it's telling me you're an alien from the Syrian Empire or whatever. I have stuff like that happen to me, is why I bring it up. If I have no way of implementing that in my life so that it will make the purpose that I know I have be stronger or more expansive or have a higher impact and uplift humanity, if I don't have some way to handle that in that moment, then I put it in the back corner of my brain and I wait until a time where it maybe will be helpful. But for now, it's not helpful. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to be very practical about that. And so that's how my family handled life.
Yeah. And now I understand a little more too, because I know you called me out on your podcast when I used the term snafu, and now you're using boots on the ground. So I think those are all kind of military related, and thank you very much for your father's service. But yeah, I think that all comes from the military background there. But yeah, no, that is awesome. So when was the second time?
The second time was not a physical event like that dealt with a storm cloud, but was when the thunder beings called me into service. This is a very Native American paradigm, or indigenous to North America, I should say, is more appropriate. And that is when you are called into service, where you have a mystical event that is life altering. It is complete. And you're very cognizant. So it's not unconscious. It's very cognizant. You're very aware. Best I can describe is you're 100% aware of everything to such a high level that you tap in to your spiritual self, your mental self, your emotional self, and you feel your physical self. Like it's all happening at once. It's total and complete harmonization. I have chatted with other mystics. We don't experience it all the same, but we all have a knowing of, I've had that moment. And those are people who talk about, I woke up one morning and I just knew that I knew. That's more clairsentience. That's a knowingness. This is in the moment you're having it. And some people call it having that waking vision. So it's like almost a portal. I love our new modern Hollywood abilities to show portals, because you feel like portals open and all that you ever were, all that you're ever going to be, and you're sitting there as a singularity in total and complete knowing in your moment. Now, very few mystics have it in the way I did, but that's okay. However you experience that, mystics out all around the world, they know what I'm talking about. They may not be able to articulate it the way I am. They may articulate it differently, but it only happens to, I'd say, 0.001% of us on planet. But those of us that does happen to, no one will ever have control over you again, because you know who you are, you know what you're supposed to do, and you are so purpose-driven that hell could freeze over and you would still find a way to dig a pit.
I love that. So for those of us that have not seen that, would you say kind of what you've seen Hollywood, is that fairly close to what it looks like?
Not even close.
Not even close. Okay, because as I say, a lot of times it's not even close, but they just kind of,
But it's a beautiful representation. One of the things I loved about The Matrix was where they would show how buildings could warp and weave. That there were times where reality will warp and weave, and you'll have this bubbling effect that happens around you as you realize that you're being pulled out of what you perceive to be a three-dimensional reality, but is in actuality in a four-dimensional space-time. And you feel that, and then all of a sudden you experience that fourth dimension.
Wow, that is cool. So what would you say inspired you? Because you had a career in analytical biochemistry and guiding others. So how did you get to that, to guiding others through spiritual and the financial abundance?
The financial abundance thing came first. I think it was part of my training as I was getting ready to be woken up the second time. The training in finances came as a result of me going back to school after 20 years of not being in college. 20 years later, I decided, I need to get my master's in education. Don't ask me why. I just thought I needed to do that. So I did. And I had 4 small children under the age of 7. And there I am trying to get my master's. And what was fascinating was during that period of time, I just knew, and that's where that clairsentience would sometimes be a real pain in the backside. You just know, you have absolutely no logic. I'm an analytical biochemist by training. It's like very linear logic, right? You use set theory. There are variables and paradigms that you use. And yet I just knew that I understood money in a way a lot of people did not. And now I'm not the type that understands money to the level of, say, a Warren Buffett or Robert Kiyosaki or others that are very adept. But I knew that I would always have what I needed. I would always be financially secure, and not necessarily independent, but secure. And I knew it because of these principles that I had. And so while I was getting my master's, and please realize this is back in the dark ages, I like to say, the dark ages of 2002 through 2004. Amazon was known for reselling books. Okay. It was
it was not the mega it is today. Yeah.
YouTube hadn't come into being yet. We were all on MySpace. Okay, so I'd like to put that into context. I had a moment where my advisor said, Janine, you have the 60-40 principle that you're teaching all of your students in physics class. You're teaching it to every single one of the faculty members who ask you about money. We want you to make it your thesis, and we want you to make a book. And I was like, I don't have any authority. Publisher, I had 35 rejection letters. There wasn't a single publishing house that would even look at me because I was a so-called college professor. But it wasn't like I was, in money. I was a freaking mathematician and physicist. It was like, whatever, right? Like
Right.
what is not appropriate for us. So I found this really cool thing called POD, print on demand services. And you could, it's all the rage now. I feel like everybody's finally joined my party, is what I kind of feel like. But anyway, so I printed my master's thesis on a POD service. Why? Because I had people asking for my master's thesis. Like they couldn't keep it in the college library because people kept stealing it. And they'd be like, oh my God. So I was going to, oh my God, this is another thing. Kinko's, you go run down to Kinko's.
Don't see those anymore either.
No, you don't. Anyway, and so it was costing me $15 every time to build it out. So I was asking people for $20. And that's how my book, Money, It's Not Just for Rich People, started. It was not because I saw myself as an author or even a financial expert. I don't consider that. But for some reason, people understood what I was saying with the 60-40 principle. And then my mentor said, I want you to run I almost said webinar. We didn't have those yet. I want you to run a workshop, and we're going to hold it for the entire student body. And for 3 months, I want you to follow people, and I want you to coach them. And mentoring and coaching wasn't quite a thing yet. So this was all kind of revolutionary for its time. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I mentored 35 families, and all but one family became wealth accumulators in 90 days. So that's how it started.
Wow. And I did put your website up there, the 8 Gates, because you have links on there as well. So anyone that's interested in getting those books and reading, they can grab them from your website, I believe, correct?
Yes, that's totally fine. And there's also a place where you can get my Ditch Your Debt While Banking Bucks. That's my newest version of the 60-40 principle. You can get it for free, and I have a free online course. So you don't have to pay a dime. Okay. And if you need help understanding where that is, just email me or talk to Laura. She'll be able to get you in touch with me.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you believe one's spiritual, emotional, and physical state intertwines with their financial well-being?
It's all the same, is how I like to state it. One of the challenges is a lot of people have been so filled with some sort of trauma, they escape into their head. I know I was one of those. There was a lot of times where I was in life or death situations when I was quite young, and I didn't quite understand what was going on around me. And so there's a lot of trauma and drama that you can have in your own head. And when that happens, please realize that also activates your sacral chakra. And so one of the fun things that people like to share is they're like, oh, Janine, what kind of healer are you? And I go, first chakra healer. And they're like, oh, so you don't do anything spiritually? And I'm like, until we work on that, sacral chakra, I don't care how good you get spiritually, you're going to get pulled down into your boots and deal with what's happening on planet Earth right now, right in this moment. So it's always a lot of fun. I always say, no, I don't do any of that other stuff. I'm just a first chakra healer.
So are you still working with individuals and uncovering what kind of barriers they have that hinder them from financial progress? Or are you going more towards, like, I know you're kind of started a new realm, and I know you have the practical mystic, and you do a little bit of everything. So it's kind of hard to...
Well, this is the thing. I attract 4 different demographics. And so this is a marketing nightmare. As far as any marketing person will tell you, a confused client will not buy. A confused customer will not buy. Well, and so I kind of say, well, it's okay. I just operate in 4 different demographics. The first one is financial freedom, get out of debt, that kind of thing. I said the second one is I help authors write their story, write their legacy. A lot of people are getting older, and since photographs and album covers, so much has changed in the digital era. We're actually losing family legacy because of the digital era, because a lot of the people are dying, and then people aren't scanning photos, all that kind of stuff. So I work with people on how to build their legacy, right? So that's authors. I help authors. All right. Then The third one is I'm really good at business. Don't ask me why, but I am. I've been running businesses since I was 10-year-old. I understand how to make things profitable. I understand how to build your business so you stay in a profit margin. And so I have the thriving solopreneur. So that's the third demographic. Now, the fourth one, that's fun. That's the spiritual demographic. And I absolutely love working with my woo-woo community, as my scientific friends call it. The woo-woo community is great. They're so good. They understand helping people with their drama, their trauma, their subconscious rate limiting beliefs and blah, blah, blah. But these healers, they're really good at that. And yet they suffer from their own scarcity mentality, or they don't know how to handle money well, or they just don't know how to get a grip on money. It's been confusing to them. They've never really understood it. And that's where I seem to be able to help them, is say, all right, you know a lot. You have these amazing spiritual gifts. Let's keep you in a profitable place. And that's what I do. So money is involved in all of those categories. So it's just the four different demographics. Are you in debt? Are you a writer? Or do you want to be an author? Are you a business person? Or are you a mystic? It's up to you.
So you really are a financial first responder and a first chakra healer for any of those.
Right.
And you just
for
kind
any of those. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That I think it's beautiful, because a lot of people don't even, think about how all that intertwines, but that's why some people think you can compartmentalize it, but really one affects the other. I mean, it is all intertwined.
It really is. And that's why marketing people look at me and go, oh my God, your website is a mess. It's a nightmare. How do you even make money? And I go, because I do a lot of podcasts and I do a lot of TV shows and stuff like that. So people hear my story, and then they realize when they hit my website, there's a lot there, but the easiest way is just join me for Open Friday Coffee. Just join me for Open Friday Coffee, and then I can give you direct links, and you don't have to worry about going through a funnel.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you do have the Janine Bolon Show, the YouTube channel, which I got the QR code up. So, and that links to many of your shows and words of wisdom there. I know I was listening to a few of the Practical Mystic myself, but loads of good information. I just love your heart and all that you pour into people too. That's not something you find much nowadays, but so especially the financial help. So what key principles or teachings do you impart to spiritual seekers of various paradigms, and, to deepen their connection with their source? And how do you do all that?
First, we were talking about money, so I would like to talk a little. Oh no, it's all the same subject. It's all the same subject. So in order to answer that question, we have to go back to the foundation. Realize if you're struggling with money and yet you find yourself incredibly spiritual, if you were to draw a circle around the crown chakra, it goes perfectly into your root chakra. Okay. If you draw circles around, this is how they're connected. So people who are incredibly spiritual, I know they've had some event in their life that has caused them to feel not only unsafe, but life or death. And that forces you into the spiritual path all on your own. Nobody has to do anything for you. You either become an analytic to where you want logic and only logic, and you're only going to make choices based on data, or it forces you into the intuitive space. And a lot of people go, oh, that means your heart. I'm like, no, it's the eye of God. It's that third eye. I force you up in there. I said, it takes time for people to go back into their heart after they've had that kind of an event. And we encourage people to go into their heart. And this is why almost everywhere you turn, people are like, just breathe, just breathe. You probably hear it so much you want to scream. And I don't blame you, because I was the same way. And that was because they wanted to get you in your heart chakra, and it pulls you down out of your head, and it keeps you out of fear, and it keeps you in that heart chakra, because the heart chakra is the only one that's not connected to any of the others in that circular sense. When you look at the chakras lined up and you draw circles, you'll see which ones are connected. And those are the yin and yang of those. And of course, there are other paradigms that talk about each chakra has its own yin and yang. You can totally go down that rabbit hole. You can totally have a great time. And if you're somebody who you teach all that, please reach out to me. I'd love to learn more. But for my practical mystics, when it comes to implementation, we are trying to help people with the big rocks first. And going down into those rabbit holes are all of that fine tuning. And those healers are just as valued by me as the ones that are doing big rocks. But please realize I'm a big rock healer. Like I show you the boulder that's in your, in your way. And then as you get better and better at walking around those boulders, then we put you in touch with those beautiful healers who have the paradigms and the practices that will get you fine-tuned.
Gotcha.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all kind of have a tribe, right? Mm-hmm. Have a tribe because we can't specialize or be the guru for everything. And I know we're always all constantly learning. So yeah, it only makes sense that you have, a tribe of people to help fine tune, as you would say,
right?
Tune all that.
I have 92. I have 92 healers that I can call on at any one time who I have either used their services or I'm very familiar with people who have. These are people not only that I know and I like, but I do trust them to refer them. And so that's why I'm always like, when somebody comes to me and says, oh, this is my problem, I'll say, what have you done? Have you done this? Have you done that? And if they're like, yes, 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 I'm like, I'm not your person. Moving on. This is the person you need to go to. I'm not going to waste your time or your money. I'm going to make sure that we're a good fit. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is incredible. And I know we have a lot more to discuss, but right now we need to take a quick word from our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Hey, we got soul. Oh, yeah, we got soul.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat, but the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Hi, I'm Sarah Stockham, and I'm host of Simply Sarah. Join me Thursdays at 3 p.m. Pacific on the Achieve TV network for the best energetic tools to elevate your amazing life right here on E360 TV.
So Janine, how do you approach teaching individuals to expand their intuitive gifts and tap into their inner wisdom for financial empowerment?
Most of the people that come to me are pretty aware of their own spirituality. And so what we do is we start them off with the basics. I'll ask them, how comfortable are you with a calculator? There have been some practical mystics that I have met who are so spiritually oriented that they were actually unable to do the math. And we're talking simple arithmetic. I'm not talking about algebra. We're not even close to calculus. Okay. We're talking about what I call consumer math. They really didn't know how to do that. So I start off, first of all, asking that question. If people go, oh yeah, I got that on lock. I'm like, okay, so you have compound interest. And they're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm under fluorescent lights and I see rows and rows of desks and I'm sitting there with my number 2 pencil and you're asking me a question about math. That's usually where people of our generation go when I start mentioning math. They freak out and they think about all the little circles they had to fill out for their, test scores. So I like to calm them down and say, look, I want you to get a pen. I don't want you using a pencil. They're like, what if I make a mistake? I'm like, good. That means you're learning. So just cross it out and start over again. And literally, I'm pretty basic when it comes to stuff. And I'm asking questions like, well, how much money did you spend last month? And what did you spend it on? And then we start off with, okay, so how much money did you make? How much money came in? The thing that I have noticed, and this is true of some of the certified financial planners that I've worked with, not to mention any names, who did not understand their cash flow. They did not understand where their money was coming in from because everybody just assumes it's their paycheck, and they did not know where their cash was going. And if you do not know that basic thing, which is why we track our expenses, that's the very first thing I have people do. And they're like, oh my God, it's so laborious and I hate it and I don't like it. And I'm like, then find a tool that allows you to do that easily. But the thing is every dime that you're spending, is it going to something that is in alignment with your purpose? Is it a part of your moral compass? And it's amazing how many people will look at all the subscriptions they have and they just start axing them right, left, and center because they realize that they needed it at that one time. Like, we'll take a very common one, one that I've been with for a long time, Netflix. I like Netflix because I remember the days when it used to show up in my mailbox because I was out in the middle of Nowheresville in a particular very rural state. And I remember we would get our DVD in the mail. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? Now, of course, Netflix is a streaming service. Okay. But that subscription still serves me. All right. I still use it. However, there are times where you will subscribe to something and it will work for a period of time. Then you change, then you pivot, then you're moving into a different area. Your purpose is more clear. You have more clarity on it, what have you, but yet you still have that subscription. And so the thing is you don't bust yourself on this. You don't talk negatively about yourself. Oh, I was such an idiot. I'm so stupid. No, that doesn't serve anything or anyone, most especially you. So what you do is you just go and you just cancel the subscription. That's all you do. I love what you say. Laura has it so totally on point with the Mindful Mondays. And that is without judgment. Okay. And that includes on yourself. All right. So mindfulness without judgment means I no longer need that. And just like a tree that lets go of its leaf, does it have a lot of judgment? Oh my God, leaf, buck up and get on with the program. Why are you turning orange? You're supposed to be green, baby. We need chlorophyll. No. Right. But unfortunately, people treat themselves that way. And that's how I want people to treat expenses that they no longer really need anymore. They can just let it kind of pivot out of their life, and no judgment with that, because there's a lot of excess energy used in judgment, and all it does is slow your progress down spiritually and physically.
Yeah, it really does. And I think it tends to carry over, into everything else, and you don't really realize it. And that is a really good tip to start. But what are some practical steps also that people could take to transition from living paycheck to paycheck to a life of abundance and financial freedom? Because I know the majority of America, at least, is still paycheck to paycheck.
So depending upon what type of computer you have or how you access the internet in whatever way you do, get your Microsoft Excel spreadsheet or get Google Sheets, or you can use Macs. I think the Macintosh has numbers, and put in expenses for 2024 and start tracking every penny that you spend, and start tracking every penny that comes into your world. And this is the thing that my people find out. You do that for 3 months. What is amazing is people say, the only money I get is money I get from, my paycheck to paycheck. All of a sudden they start seeing all the other ways that money comes into their lives. Because I turn to them and I go, how many things did you get at a discount? How many times does somebody say, normally I charge people $5. Give me $3. $2 you saved. Whatever that is. Even if it's not income as far as money coming in, you're getting discounts all the time. Why? Because you're a good human being and people like doing business with you. It's amazing. If you are a good human being and you treat people like people, it's amazing how many things people give you at discounted and they don't charge the enormous rates. Why is that? Because you're not a pain in the butt to deal with, and they like doing business with you, and they want you to come back because you're a fun customer to be with. I'm not talking about big corporations, but I am talking about those people you support who are solopreneurs, or maybe they only have 10 employees. That's what we're talking about. The little independents. Oh my gosh, they love customers who are easy to work with, right?
Yeah. Your small businesses, your small communities are often like that. And if you've ever been living in big cities and stuff, you might find you miss that unless you visit a lot of the smaller businesses. It's a totally different dynamic.
In bigger cities, they are there, because I used to have time where I was in LA or Chicago, You have to search it out, but I do find them, and I get on a first name basis. And I used to get faux a lot from a little corner area in Chicago, and I got to know the names of the people, and they had American names. I always laughed about that. I'm like, okay, John, we know that's not your real name. And he would always laugh at me. But anytime I walked in, they called me by my name, and I make sure I get faux from them. And I ordered similar things every time, unless he had something new in. He goes, we got something new in if you want to give it a try. And I'm like, I'm up for anything. Let's go. And so that's where you want to be with people. It's just treating people like people. But I know you asked me for a different tip, and I gave you the very same one. Why? Because this is the basics. If you are not going to take the time to understand where you are in your financial journey, I can't help you. If you come to me after having 90 days of tracking your expenses and you still need my help, then we'll talk. But that is the key. And believe it or not, the very first couple of courses, the first couple of lessons of my courses is like, here's your Zoom link. This is when we meet. This is blah, blah, blah. Start tracking your expenses. Do this, do that. Very first class, I go, okay, welcome. Nice to have everybody. So how you doing on tracking your expenses? Deadpan.
So you get the deer in headlights.
And I'm like, okay, well, it's been lovely chatting with all of you. When you do your bring your spreadsheets. We're not going to be looking at them, but I want them pulled up on your computer so that we can talk about the expenses you're having, blah, 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 blah. Great chatting with you. Talk to you later. And they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What? That's it? I'm like, you must do the homework. Otherwise, you don't get to talk to me. I'm sorry. I've been a college professor for over 35 years. If you're not going to do the homework, I'm not wasting my time, right? Yeah. Because your time's too valuable too. And that's the thing. Sometimes you just really need a spear in the butt. And I do that to people. I'm very direct. And when people get cranky at me, you could have said that a lot nicer, Janine. I said, yeah, but would you have listened?
Right.
And the answer is no. Sometimes I'm just that poke in the butt you need. And I'm sorry that you maybe have your feelings hurt. And this is why I don't hang out on social media, because we have a lot of people that get their feelings hurt a lot very easily. And then all of a sudden I'm the bad guy because I pointed out an uncomfortable truth for you. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. Go tell someone else. That's why you have a therapist, and so I'm what they call a cognitive therapist. Okay. Not that I have any training. I'm not trained in this, but I am very cognitive in my practical, and my mysticism is very cognitive. I watch the thoughts of people, and I like to share with folks, and I wish I'd come up with this. I didn't. It's Dr. Pat Allen who came up with this. And Dr. Pat Allen used to say, and I was like, oh my God, sing it, sister. She's singing my song. And that it was, if you want somebody who really will help you with the emotions you're dealing with, you need to go to an emotive therapist. They're the ones that if you say, oh my God, my cat died, and they're like, oh, that must really, how are you feeling about that? That's emotive therapy, right? They're walking you through the emotions, right? Helping you through the grief. Thank God for people like that, because I am not that. All right. You come to me, oh, my cat died. I said, did you get it buried? Everything okay? All right, moving on. We're going to get a new cat.
All right.
Get a new cat. Let's go. I'm like, and people are like, oh, that's so awful. I'm like, no, you want somebody like me in a crisis. You want somebody like me to show you what the facts are. And you want somebody like me to be very honest about where you're standing right now. Mm-hmm. Why? Because that cat that you are in grief over and you're sobbing about is up on the fourth dimensional plane of existence, romping around, having the time of its life. It is a soul. It is with its creator. It's having a great time. And you're sitting here sniveling because you miss it down here on planet Earth in a three-dimensional space-time. Is that a little too real for you? I'm not your person. So unless you want truth, real and unvarnished, don't ask me to be an emotive therapist. That is not where I excel. Go to those beautiful people. Oh, I saw a perfect one. It was on the commercials. It was Stacy, what was her name? Oh my goodness. Sharon, I can't remember. She was on the commercial that you guys just saw, and she's delightful. I've actually met her. She has been referred into my network. She is
Sarah, Simply Sarah.
Sarah, Simply Sarah.
Yeah.
That's her. She actually is asking me onto her show in a little bit. She's the one you go to for stuff like that, because that's what she's good at. So don't ask me to be a Sarah. And oh, for God's sake, don't ask Sarah to be a Janine. That would just be cruel.
That would be, well, we are uniquely who we are. So, and we're all needed, but yeah, no, that is funny. So can you share a significant turning point though, or realization? So when your journey propelled you towards fulfilling your life's purpose?
It happened on December 26th of 2010. And that says a lot for me because usually I suck when it comes to figuring out time. And when did this happen? I don't know.
Yeah.
My children still laugh because I screw up their birthdays, not the dates, but the year. Like, I'm like, wait, what year was that again? And they're like, oh my gosh, Mom. I'm like, yeah, I know I was there, but I was drugged up. Give me a break, right?
Yep.
This is what I like to share with them. But that turning point for me was when I had a mystical experience that was so profound and so deep that it couldn't be denied. And a lot of mystics talk about that they will have some sort of a singularity, some sort of an experience that is so profound and so shakes them to their core, that you're left being a little crazy. St. Francis showed it best, I think, when he had his life-altering event in his mysticism, when they're dressing him in all these beautiful robes and everything. And he's like, you don't need this. You don't need anything. And he's stripping himself naked in the village square and he walks off. And I'm like, yep, he got touched. You can tell these mystics because they become a little crazy. There were some mystics that after these life-altering events, they would jump. They would be in such a state of joy, they would jump a 7-foot fence flat-footed. Now, don't ask them to ever do it again, but after those moments, they were superhuman. It's that superhuman that comes in. What does superhuman mean? It means you transcended three-dimensional understanding of yourself. You now understand yourself as the four-dimensional being that you are. And I say that with physics. I am not talking about those mystics who talk about, oh, my master's at 22 level, 22nd dimension. It's like they see it very linearly. No. I know exactly what I'm saying when I say fourth dimension. And that means you have a tesseract, not the one that Marvel Comics talks about that uses a space-time bulge that they had Yoki running around with on a staff. I'm talking about the true mathematical tesseract. Go to Wikipedia, look up tesseract. They have a beautiful video that shows you how that thing moves and realize, how do you see something that moves in 4 dimensions if you're only 3-dimensional? Well, that's easy. If we all lived in 2 dimensions, like a flat piece of paper, what would we see? So kind of walk yourself through that. That's why I only go to 4th dimension, because I'm good and I'm pretty excellent when it comes to my mathematics and my understanding, but I can't think beyond 4 dimensions. And I've even had spiritual experiences where I was in the 4th dimension looking at the 3-dimensional universe. And that was December 26th of 2010. That's why when people say, oh, my master, he's a 5th dimensional being, or I'm a 12th dimensional being, or I'm like, have you ever had physics? Do you know what you're saying?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm a little too direct, because I know my truth. I know what it means to be a 4th dimensional observer of a 3-dimensional space-time. So I'd like to know what you're saying, really. Are you just saying that my guides aren't as good as your guides because your guides are 22 dimensions and mine's only 4? I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying here. And so I encourage other practical mystics, don't get into the numbers. Get into your own personal experiences. And so that life-altering event for me, when I was able to look down on all of creation in its little 3-dimensional sphere, standing in 4th dimensional space-time, although I can't even really call it that, allowed me to have a perspective to where I truly cannot hate. I can only love all of humanity because I see where people were struggling from. And I remember feeling in that moment that I could have changed anything on planet. And I wanted to very badly because I have so much compassion for people who are suffering. But what was, this is direct truth. And you know what, Laura, a lot of people may be really angry with what I'm going to say, but this is what I know my truth to be. That was, I was going to change something in the world. I was given permission by the divinity that was expressing itself to me in that moment. And it said, I'll change anything for you. Just tell me what it is. I'll change it. And so I don't make unilateral decisions like that when it's going to affect all billions of us, right? So I opened my consciousness to all of humanity and I said, What is it that you want? And there was a moment where I went a little insane because I heard everybody all at once, and that was kind of overwhelming. But what was the take-home message was everybody's getting exactly what they want. And that's hard for people to hear. They're like, I didn't want to be molested as a child, or I didn't want this, or I didn't want that. And that's where, when you tell people they are the creator of their own reality, that can be a little touch and go as a teacher, because you want to share with them, look, I'm not blaming you. I'm saying this without judgment, but they're so used to people judging them when they say something, they can't help but be defensive, right? So it has to be very specific students that are brought into my world, because I handle it very cognitive. I'll be like, well, what did you learn from that experience? If you never wanted that, what did you learn? And almost everybody immediately, bam, has an answer. What they learned from that horrific, not something I would ever put them through, experience, right? I have too much compassion in my heart. I would never do that to another human being. And then here's the second truth that people get pissed off about. And you don't have to believe me. You can can this session. You don't even have to listen to it. The second truth I learned was that the people who are the most horrific to you, the people who are the most toxic and awful in the spiritual realm, they're your best friend. Wow. Who else would you trust to push you to your limit and not break you? It would be a best friend. A lot of people don't want to admit that. So that person who molested you, that person who raped you, that person who called you a dumb, MFer repeatedly till you believed it, the person who called you stupid so that you thought you were stupid and you come to find out later you have an IQ that's genius level. Those people were actually your best friend, and they chose to be your villain. That's why I can't hate anybody.
Yeah.
Now that's my truth. Nobody else has to accept it.
No. But obviously it's definitely something impacting. So it's like, because you know exactly the day, which is what happens. Like not a lot of, certain things. I mean, certain traumas. Yeah, I can tell you exactly a day or a time, but that's totally different. So what advice would you give to those who are hesitant to explore their intuitive abilities or their spiritual connection?
If you're hesitant to do that, then I would say, why am I hesitant? Get your answer. And then whatever your answer, let's say, I don't know what I'll find. Well, why are you afraid of what you won't find? Because I've been hurt in the past when I didn't know what was going on. Okay. How are you hurt in the past? And you just keep asking why. Why is a very powerful tool. I was taught very young not to ask why and keep my mouth shut. People saw it as a defiance of authority. And that was not it. I was actually an insatiably curious child. And I got in a lot of trouble for asking questions. Now I'm a podcaster and a radio show host of 7 different shows. And I ask questions every day, all day, and get paid for it. So for people who are hesitant to find out about their own spiritual leanings, please realize most of the time you're worried about being set astray. You're worried about being taken off a path and put on a path that you will later find out is false. The thing that I can guarantee you is if you're hesitant, then don't trust anybody else except yourself. And the best way to trust yourself is to ask yourself, why? Now, your brain has the best SEO of anything. So the question you ask, if it's positive, your brain will come up with every positive reason why you should do something. But if you're terrified or if you're scared and you're like, I don't want to do that because it will list off every horror you have ever experienced, that you have ever seen anybody else have, any TV show you've ever watched that something horrible happened to somebody else, it will list off all that. So focus on the positive and say, what is the best thing that could happen to me if I investigated my spiritual path? What are the best things that could happen to me? And really work on that. Ask yourself that at least 3 or 4 times and journal it if that's the way you learn before you say, what's the worst that could happen to me? And for most women, it's, I could be burned alive at the stake. We have a conscious ancestral memory of any time we got a little too powerful, a little too cognitive, a little too intuitive, like we knew who was running around having extramarital affairs, even though we didn't have logic, but our intuition would signal us. We were a little too accurate, so obviously a witch and needed to be burned at the stake. Just realize a lot of that fear is ancestral, and it kept us alive, right? So you can't blame yourself for having those defensive mechanisms.
Yeah, and it's something you didn't necessarily hear a lot about, or at least, I guess, in my world, I never really heard about. Ever since I've done this, I have met more and more people. There are actually a lot of very intuitive, people out there. Some of them just may not be sure what to do.
Correct. The other thing is to the men. I'd like to let you know, as an analytical biochemist, I know that there are 23 gene sequences that help you with your intuition. So men are incredibly intuitive as well. And that's why I always like to ask the men around me. I'll say, so what do you think about this? I don't ask them how they feel. I always say, what do you think about this? And then they'll rattle off a bunch of logic. And I said, what's your best guesstimate? I use those kind of words with men so that they stay in their head, but at the same time, subconsciously, they've picked up intuitively a lot of markers. It's so fast for them because they are the ones that had to go out and kill the wild animal to bring it back to the rest of the tribe. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're stereotypical, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I am talking about ancient history here. This is what happened. I'm not being stereotypical, but I'm like, the guys went out to do that. They had, by God, better be good when they knew that eyes were watching them and they weren't human, right? Or maybe if they were human, if they had a warring tribe that was after them, right? So their intuition is just as highly developed as ours, which is why men, when they're women, I'm talking about heterosexual relationships here, but, when men have their wives or girlfriends or whatever that become very mystical or psychic, they get very concerned because they don't know how to protect them for something that is not in the three-dimensional space-time, which is very sweet. And that happens, of course, in the homosexual relationships too, but we're just using it because it's fast.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, it's ancestral, but it's like there was men hunt, women gather.
Right.
That's what it used to always be.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we can't do the other. I'm just saying that's ancestral. And that's one of the things that is very hardwired. And as much as we would love for other things, and there is the evolution of humanity that is happening, I will acknowledge that, but realize as much as we want to make certain changes, if you put a 125-pound woman up against a 125-pound man, biophysically, unless there's a lot of training, the male dynamic is just going to pummel the female dynamic, which is why I learned to excel mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell me, in your experience, what is the most rewarding aspect of helping others achieve their dreams and transform their lives for the better?
Pretty much every teacher has this. And that is when you've opened enough doors and the student or person has walked through enough of those doors that you see them discover truth for themselves, then nobody can take that away. To me, that's the most rewarding.
Yeah. I think it's awesome what you have. I don't even know how you balance all of that, because when you say you got 7 different shows, you already do a lot, but I'm sure and I know if I remember seeing an email correctly, you have something new coming on the horizon. What do you got coming up now?
I have the Circle of the Sacred Heart. This is a new aspect. The Practical Mystic show got syndicated and became absorbed in the Janine Bolon show. So the Janine Bolon show is still running and still operating, but we were asked to combine all 7 of my podcasts into one. So just go to the YouTube channel. You'll see the different playlists. And that's why we have all those different playlists, was from when we got syndicated. But the biggest thing is the Circle of the Sacred Heart is where we're actually building out a community that will meet again. With 2020 and all that happened with that, I basically had 20 years of community building that fell apart because we had to go online. And so many different people were in such different places. It was something that just fell literally to part. So now that I'm in 2024, 4 years later, I now know the cycle is right for me to be able to start building that community again. And we're doing it online, but we also offer in-person events. And we finally found a location to do the in-person event. So we will have a retreat on August 2nd through the 4th of 2024. And if you want any information, just come to Open Friday Coffee and ask me, and I'll be glad to let you know. But it will be in Colorado.
Okay. And that the Friday Coffee link, that's on your website, correct?
It is. If you go to contact us, the only way to contact us is through Open Friday Coffee. If you want to talk to me, otherwise you get a hold of lovely Tasha. Tasha is and realize, yes, I do a lot, but I have a team of 15 people that help me get where I need to go, Laura. Okay. I'm not a one-man band.
No, you have processes in place that you put in place.
I have a lot of good people that are behind me helping prop me up when I need to be propped up.
Some of us still struggle to get those processes in place. So hats off to you for getting all that running. Well, we have a few minutes left. What would you like to leave the audience with before we go?
I want you to realize that you're here on Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross, and she is building out her own set of community and people. And if you really like what she has to say, please support her in whatever way your finances, your spiritual situation will allow. Podcasters like Laura help people like me be able to be recognized by a greater audience. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we are in competition. Laura and I are very different types of healers. We're different type of podcasters. So if your message with Laura resonates more, please support her in whatever way you can. And then if you do find something that I say that resonates with you and accentuates you and supports what you know to be true, then I would love to have your support. But otherwise, not at the expense of Laura, because what Laura is doing is a cornerstone and a foundation. And so that's the one thing I like to remind people, is that it is an honor and a privilege to be on somebody else's platform. They think the message that you have is worthy enough to be broadcast. And I do not take that sort of compliment lightly. So thank you, Laura.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate you and everything that you do. And you and I are the same with that. To me, there is no competition. Everything's a collaboration. I wouldn't care if there's 10 million other self-care leaders, coaches, whatever. We all bring a different perspective. And that's why I love doing this, is to bring different perspectives. And it's going to resonate with who it resonates with. I believe it finds who it needs to find.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and sharing all your wisdom with us. And she does a number of things, folks. So if any of that resonates with you, or you're, whether it's financial, spiritual, go to her website, go to her YouTube channel. She's got a lot of wonderful podcasts and stuff on there for you to tune into. And I'd love for you to reach out and connect with her. But thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you too. And we will see, I love that. And we will see everybody next week.